All right, so now we're at the machine. I want to make sure that my stitch is set to 11. And I have threaded my bobbin with the colored thread that I need, and I have my spool thread ready and my sewing machine threaded on both sides. So I'm going to insert my fabric and lower my presser foot. So the directions tell you to use 1/4 of an inch seam. 1/4 of an inch seam is basically along the inner edge of the presser foot. And when you go to make your turn, you want to make sure that you're going to have that same 1/4 of an inch seam when you turn. So you're not going to go all the way to the end, you're just going to stop about 1/4 of an inch before the end of that corner. Leave your needle in and then turn. Okay, I have my pin cushion over here to hold all of my pins. All right, and I'm going to insert my needle and start sewing. Okay, so my needle's in my fabric. I'm going to pivot. Right, I could probably go another stitch or two, so I'm going to put my fabric back, my presser foot down, and then I'm just going to turn my hand wheel towards me once to see if I'm at that 1/4 of an inch mark, which now I am. Okay, so again, I'm just going to keep stitching around my entire pillow with that 1/4 inch seam. Take out my pins as I go. So right here, my fabric is not even with one another. However, it was cut, it wasn't cut to the exact same length. That's fine. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go by the top edge so that I know that both pieces of fabric have at least 1/4 inch seam. I'm gonna move this pen because once I turn it and put my presser foot down, it would be on top of it, and we don't want that. I'm gonna check again. I could probably do even one more turn. There we go. All right. Oh my goodness, I just realized I forgot to back stitch at my start. I'm gonna have to go back and redo that. Do not do what I did. Make sure that you back stitch. Too excited to sew around my pillow. The end because I've reached the 2 pins so that I know we're back at the opening. I'm gonna go ahead and take those 2 pins out because I don't need them in there anymore. But because I forgot to back stitch at the start, I want to make sure that that stitch is secure. So I'm gonna go back to the start, and I have a little bit of space right before. So I'm gonna start there, and then I'm gonna go all the way to where I started and then back stitch again. All right. That way my stitch will now be secure. Okay. Ouch. Oh gosh. Okay. I'm gonna take these pins out too. Okay. So now I've stitched all the way around, I have my opening, and what you want to do next is take your fabric shears, and we're going to go ahead and trim the corners, and we're going to clip any loose threads that we have. So I'm going to go ahead and start clipping. Now, when you go to trim your corners, you're just going to cut a diagonal piece of the fabric, but don't cut your stitch. So you're just going to cut on the other side of your stitch. That way you're not undoing it on accident. Trim this piece of overlap that I've got because I don't want a lot of extra in my pillow. I want my seams to be even as best as they can be. Make sure that my sewing thread tails are cut. Okay. So now we're going to flip our, move this out of the way. We're going to flip our pillows inside out. And we want to make sure that our pillow points are actually points. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick my finger in the points. We also have our point turner. So we could use this as well. And when you use a point turner, it's really going to get that corner out as far as it should. So if you'd like to borrow a point turner, you can. If you don't have one and you're doing this at home, or you know, years from now you're making a pillow for whatever reason, or something that requires a point, you can always use like the dull end of a pen or something like that too, to get those corners the way that we want them. Okay, so here is my space pillow case, because it's not quite a pillow just yet. And here's my opening. All right, so next what we have to do is fill our pillow with our beanbag beans, okay? And then we're going to hand sew this in together. That way we're gonna use our blind stitch. That way you can't actually see any of the stitching. Some people, when they're lazy and they don't want to hand stitch it, or they don't know how, they'll just put this part under their sewing machine and stitch across. But then you have this like really nice like no seam edge, and then just a random stitch of seaming. So we're gonna hand stitch it so that you guys are doing it correctly. But you might see videos online of people doing that, and it really is just laziness. So that's why they do it. I'm gonna have to fix this point a little bit. All right, so I am going to fill my pillowcase and then I'll come back.